I think it's fabulous to see you all today, and thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us for what is our second Dialogic OD Salon. And there's six of the authors of the what is now 8 books, because I think, Jervis, if I'm right, today is the release date for book number 8. Is that right?
Sorry, is that directed at me?
Yes, Jervis. Yes, today is the release date of book number 8.
Yep, new book today. Yahoo! I'll talk a little bit about it at the end.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we've got 6 of us authors here today, and in a similar way to if you joined the session in September. In a second, I'll ask my colleagues to share their thoughts around our question for today, which is, how do leaders become ready for emergent change? And once we've had a chance to have a conversation and an exploration as a panel, and I love the idea when it came up about hosting this salon, and a little bit about what the salon is about, you know, to sort of exchange ideas and to, I love the phrase of entertain each other. So I'm looking forward to being entertained by each other today, but also to kind of explore and to learn together and to maybe provoke each other and inspire each other around this topic. So once we've had a chance to explore this question ourselves, then we'll be splitting you into smaller groups to start to think about, well, what does this mean for me? You know, what is it about this question? What's been generated for me? What feels important about this topic? And what does it mean for the work that I do? What does it mean for me in my current context? So we can do that bit of shared meaning making together. And then we'll come back as one large group and just see what emerged in those conversations. And so that's our very loose framework for today. We're quite a large group, so there's 53 of us in conversation and in dialogue today, which is great. If you're wanting to contribute, then that would be brilliant. You know, please do. So it's not just all of us chatting and you listening. But if we can kind of have a discipline of, you know, if you can raise your hand in a Zoom fashion, so that we can see, it's easy then for us to spot on our screen who it is who's wanting to raise a question, or pop something into chat. You know, we'll be actively looking and monitoring chat as we go through between us all, because again, it's hard to keep and monitor everything that's going on. So we'll be using a mixture of chat and then a mixture of us going into conversation. But before we get into the topic itself, one of the things we want to offer as part of our breakout rooms is to think about, where do I sit in relation to working with leaders through emergent change? Or am I a leader myself going through emergent change? Do I work as part of an organization? Or do I work as an external support coming into organizations? And we want to offer you, when we go into the breakout rooms, the opportunity to self-select where you go. So you may want to go and have a conversation with other internal leaders or other internal support, whether they're consultants, whatever coaches, facilitators, whatever your role may be. Or you may want to group with a group of external supporters, external facilitators or consultants. So just to work out, so we can organise ourselves logistically, Jervis, have you got a poll for people to vote? And then we know how many breakout rooms to put up. And so you can then put yourself into whichever breakout room you want to go into. Brilliant.
Okay, that's everybody, I think.
Lovely, thank you, Jervis. That
for the results.
now gives you your information to reconfigure all our breakout rooms.
Okay, thanks.
Brilliant. Good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to be hosting us through this conversation. And I want to start off by just framing this discussion really about this notion of leaders becoming ready for emergent change. And in a second, I'm going to ask Jervis to spotlight the 6 of us as authors up onto the screen. And what I'd like to do is to invite each of my author colleagues in turn to listen to that question and to give an immediate response. What does it evoke in you? What does it provoke in you? And to do that initially as a headline reaction or response to the question. So we can hear from all 6 of us in turn. And then open it up in a more free-flowing conversation, because I'm anticipating there's going to be things that each of us say, which sparks reactions and responses as we build and explore and go off into different areas through our 30 minutes of exploration. So, Bob, I'm going to come to you first, if that's okay, and ask you this question. How do leaders become ready for emergent change? What does that evoke or provoke in you as an immediate response?
Well, depending on the situation, they come to deal with it through desperation. I'm being a little bit flip with that, but it's sort of like something is going on that pulls them out of, or invites them out of, or drives them out of their normal way of operating, which is, for many of them, it's kind of, they're used to doing things to force things to happen, telling people what to do, knowing where to go. And now they're suddenly in a situation that's not working. And I'm there because they've certainly tried that a few times, or their predecessors have, and it hasn't worked. They don't know what to do. Their anxiety starts going up. And I think, by the way, as an aside, that we don't always recognize that powerful leaders can also be anxious. And I think, and we need to attend to that anxiety, because their anxiety has to come down enough for them to be willing to try and do what I will call inquire and learn versus do and tell. And trying to recognize what's going on, which buttons are being pushed for them, and how to have them understand a role different from what they're used to, but a meaningful role, an important role, one where they have something to do. I think sometimes people try and drive leaders out of the process. Go stand in the corner until we're done. And leaders want to be doers, so they need to have something that they're doing that's constructive, but that perhaps is not something that they have thought about before. The notion of convening a group, to creating the boundaries for it, providing it with resources, waiting until something comes back and then trying to deal with it. And so sometimes it's laying out for them a different paradigm. And if they are pushed back on that, I think for me, some of it is, well, what have you tried so far, and why are you trying to do something that keeps failing? Let's try something new. It's an experiment. And I think I'm going to be quiet for a while and see what else comes up.
Lovely.
What happens when you pick on me first?
No, thank you, Bob. Thanks for just laying out that territory. And there's so much in there that I'm kind of now really curious about exploring further. But Sarah, can I invite you to share your immediate reactions to this question about how leaders become ready for emergent change?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question. I noticed there's a couple of comments in the chat about what is emergent change, what do we mean by emergent change? And the easiest way to understand what we're talking about is the difference between planned change and emergent change. So planned change really is familiar to most of us as you know, the planning a change from beginning to end with an implementation plan and all the rest of it. And emergent change is much more about things that happen in the moment unexpectedly. They emerge from setting conditions. It's about creating conditions where something happens. It's worth noting, of course, that emergent change is always going on in organizations. People are constantly making changes in their own areas that suit them, that aren't part of the plan, just rearranging the environment to suit themselves. Emergent strategy people might be familiar with. So we have a planned strategy, but meanwhile somewhere else somebody's trying something that's working, and eventually it kind of comes to us consciousness. So we're in that territory. So I think with what Bob was saying about the kind of cognitive adjustment is really important. But in my experience as well, leaders have to go on an emotional journey, because the understanding of leadership is so different when you're thinking in an emergent frame rather than a planned frame. And this is, in a way, the bigger part of the challenge: how you help leaders to let go of some of the old stories about what leadership is, so that they can work in this different way.
Lovely. Thank you, Sarah. I'm just letting those words land. There's a lot in there about with what you said there to digest. So Mark, what are your immediate reactions and responses to what you've heard so far about leaders in emergent change?
I think it's a great question, Gwen, everybody. Hi, I'm Mark McCogo. I'm the author of Hosting Generative Change, which applies my host leadership work to organizational development. It's a great book, as are all the other ones. One of the things that came up for me here, my work comes from the solution-focused tradition, which is part of the brief therapy world. And in brief therapy, there are two criteria for a kind of interesting situation. One is that the person wants something, and the second is that they've tried all sorts of things to do it and fail, more or less. So it's not interesting if they want something and haven't done anything about it. They should just get on with it. The interesting thing comes when people have tried something and it's not working. Then we have a situation to look at and unpick. And that's where, as a solution-focused practitioner, I'd be looking to get involved and help people. And often people have tried is plan change. And there is general agreement. I think when I go around asking this in seminars, who thinks plan change works? Nobody does. But there's an outside of very, very restricted, very tiny settings. So most people are skeptical of plan change. But I think there's a jump when it comes to kind of really doubling down on an emergent change strategy, which is we know where we're trying to get to, but we don't really know yet quite how we're going to go there. And so we've got to start without knowing the whole journey. But I think that is the way the world works. I think that is life. I think that is the wonderful, complex, interconnected world that we live in. And actually, this is not just businesses that do that. This is all of us who kind of come to this sooner or later, if we come to it at all. And it's a very helpful idea, this idea that you can, if you can see the whole, this is Joseph Campbell, I think, said this. If you can see the whole path mapped out, it's not your path, it's someone else's. And I find that a very powerful thought. If we really want our own path, we have to find it as we walk it. So those are some of the things that this brings up for me. It's a key question.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Mark. And Jervis, coming to you now. I've seen lots of noddings as you've been listening to Bob and to Sarah and to Mark. But what does this evoke or provoke for you, this question?
Yeah, one of the things I'm thinking is there's a difference between what brings leaders to this, which I do believe is kind of a combination of desperation, and we've tried a lot of things that didn't work, and maybe this will, and what kind of leaders are good at this, which is a kind of a different question. And because I think, all great leadership requires a certain amount of egolessness, like a greater concern for the greatness of the realm than their own personal greatness, right? And I think leaders who are mostly focused on their own achievement, accomplishment, greatness, that sort of thing, aren't very good at this, and they generally get in the way. There's this idea that has gotten some traction lately around vertical development. And the idea of vertical development has been around a long time, but lately it's starting to come into the mainstream, this idea that there are these stages of adult development, there are these post-conventional stages, and that it's at these stages that people become capable of managing the complexity and the paradoxical nature of sort of more emergent ways of doing things. I think there's a lot to that. I think Bill Torbert's research has, shown that definitely when it comes to understanding transformational change, leaders who are at these more post-conventional stages are more effective at it. And then the question becomes, okay, well, what gets someone there, right? And most of the research on that is it's tragedy. Somebody loses a child, gets divorced, something like that knocks them out of the sort of conventional ways of looking at the world and starts to be interested in relationships, the complexity of those things, paradoxical realities, able to see more systemically, all these sorts of things. But I think fundamentally it comes down to, does a leader need to be the center of attention? Do they need to be the ones that are being praised and blessed and all that? And if they are, then this thing isn't going to work. They need to be willing to hold a space where others show up and others are big and feel comfortable in that kind of space, I think. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. Yeah, Ben, what are your thoughts on this?
Just could listen to you all day. There's so much wisdom here. It's amazing. I think I've agreed with everything that's been said. I take a slightly different starting point. And I think embedded in our wonderful stimulus question is a paradigm of leader as an individual. I think perhaps because of the work we all do, and we want to go talk to a leader, and maybe get a project or understand or earn their trust or whatever support, be of service. But I've come to this point in my life where I can't think of the leader as a person. There's a dualism involved with, there's a leader and then there's their team. There's a leader and there's their org. There's a leader and there's their ecosystem. And that dualism doesn't capture the phenomenal diversity and complexity of the ecosystems in which these individuals sit. And so I can only think about this question in terms of what does the leader and their team, how do they prepare for emergent change? Or even more broadly, how does the leader and their ecosystem prepare for emergent change? Until that ecosystem, and it could be 2 people or it could be 20 people, I don't know, but until that ecosystem is engaged in a dialogue about the forces at play, or first, the feelings involved, fear, anger, hope, chomping at the bit, until that ecosystem is having some conversation that brings themselves in a fuller way to each other, I don't think an individual archetypical leader is anywhere close to emergent change. I would encourage an individual leader to look at themselves first and what they feel and maybe what they think, and how this ecosystem is arrayed in front of them, and what they actually experience as personal threats, and what their team and what they care about, their people, how those people experience this emergent change. And then to ask them to orient around generative images and what could be different and what would that feel like. And I know that this is actually true for myself. I can sit in this office and fret about my business. And it's me in a room fretting until I talk to other people. And some of those people are on this call. And when I'm engaged in that dialogue with that ecosystem, I'm far better able to hold perspective, gain other people's wisdom, check inside myself. And friends do this and mentors do this, and we do it for each other as part of a community. And for me, it's that broader, richer, diverse sense of ecosystems take this on. And leaders play a special role in that, there's no doubt, but they're embedded in that. And in that context, it's held everything.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. Thanks, Ben. And it's really interesting to hear you talking about yourself as a leader, because when I started thinking about this question earlier on today, I thought, well, actually, there's times where I, yes, work as an external consultant to support leaders and organizations make sense of what's going on around a particular period of change or transformation. But actually, I'm a leader myself. So I lead teams of consultants. And so I started to think about, well, am I ready for emergent change? Or how do I get myself ready for emergent change? And what are the things that destabilize me and cause me to kind of turn inwards and like withdraw? And what are the things and the situations and the conditions that encourage me to reach out to others, so I don't feel like I need to have all of the answers? And it was a really interesting reflection, and kind of, I did some journaling on it earlier on today. And if I think back to, and I saw somebody put it into the chat about, COVID, the pandemic, and how that threw any notion of anything planned up in the air, and everybody had to be incredibly fluid and responsive and agile to be present with what was actually happening. And none of us had anything planned, and that was the genesis for the book that I wrote for the series, about how do we move from a physical place to a virtual space and do this kind of work. So, I was right at the start of a project that I had in my head planned. Some bits of it I knew, some bits of it, what Bob was talking about earlier on, about how do we reduce levels of anxiety for our clients around us to be able to take the next step when the rest of the way ahead may not be as clear as they would like it to be. And also, how do I feel myself when I'm in those situations? And noticing, as I said, when I feel like I'm contracting and when I feel like I'm being very expansive and very generative. So for me, there's a whole parallel piece going on for me as a consultant about my own readiness and how I can keep myself agile, fluid, responsiveness, and available for whatever needs to happen.
Yeah, as you're saying that, it's really causing me to reflect on myself. And I think the first and most important lesson that opened me up to being more emergent as a leader was, people don't have to do it the way I do. Yeah, I think anybody who's going to, move up the hierarchy has to get to a point where they stop having to have it done their way, and they're just willing to leverage the abilities of others to get anything done. But as I think about it, I think that's fundamental. Like, you have to be someone who's clearly willing to let go. Nobody's going to do it in my way. They're going to do it their way, and that's okay. And there's a certain trust in that. Yeah.
So we've heard from each one of us, and I'm now just kind of going to open the space up for, we've kind of got 10 minutes left for either any one of us to come in and just build on what we've heard initially, or if there's anybody who wants to come and join us kind of in this spotlighted space to kind of contribute or ask a question. And if anybody does, we'd ask them to just put your hand up, and then you should hopefully appear at the top of my screen. And we'll just have one person in at a time to just open up the conversation a little bit wider. But in the meantime, kind of over to my colleagues to sort of build or explore or be more curious about what we've heard from each other so far.
I'd just like to make a hat tip to Dave Pendle Almira, who's been doing a fantastic job at logging key points in the chat. Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Dave.
I'm going to come back
Myrna.
Hi, Myrna. To pick up on a little bit of where I was making some of my comments, but also, Ben, when you were talking, it struck me soundly. And that is, there is the notion around how do we intellectually describe the difference between planned and generative change, and why the current conditions are calling for it. A very rational discussion, as though we're going to convince people through that about what to do and where to go. And I think we're also raising notions that other things are going on, that there are emotions involved here, that there's fear and there's hope and there's concern, and so that we need to be able to, when we talk about being ready for emergent change. It's not only an intellectual convincing people of why this is a certain type of change and you have to do it this way and we're rationally whatever, and then we're done. It's dealing with an emotional side that is not necessarily rational. And I'll say it triggers anxiety, it triggers fear, or it triggers whatever it is, or it triggers people reverting back to behavior that they're familiar with, even though it doesn't work because they don't know what else to do and they've got to try and feel comfortable. So I think dealing with the emotional side of things, the anxiety side of things is also very important. And I think when we work with a system, knowing that there are several different aspects of it that need to be attended to, I think for me makes sense. And I'm not always good at attending to all of them. I'm stronger on some and weaker on others.
Lovely, thanks, Bob.
So
I'm
got a few
aware
people
that-
putting their hands up now. Yeah. So
yeah.
let's listen to Myrna. What do you got to say, Myrna?
Thank you. Well, it's the first time I thought about it, but listening to you all earlier made me realize we can't imagine emergent change and its outcomes. And we're so used to imagining the outcome of what we're going to promise to our clients or within our organizations if we're leaders. We can't do that with emergent change. And I wonder if it's one of the barriers for engaging in it, because we can't have the dopamine kick from going, when we do emergent change, the outcome will be this. We can't see the end of that road, the Joseph Campbell thing, and therefore the emotions it triggers are uncomfortable. So I just wondered how we could reframe how we imagine, how we sell something that would be exciting and that still doesn't have a clear picture at the end. So that's just a new thought I had from listening to you.
For myself, the generative change model says that what we need to do is move away from vision, which is a clear end state in the path to get there, to purpose, which is what we're trying to do every day. And I think that's what makes it work with leaders, is we say, what we're going to do is try to accomplish this purpose. Now, how people are going to accomplish that purpose is going to emerge. People are going to come up with different ideas because there's a lot of different ways to get that purpose. And so we're going to try a bunch of different stuff. Some things will work, some things won't. But it's the purpose that animates the change. It's what we all care about and we're all trying to do every day. And I believe if you don't have that, then emergent change won't work. So we know what our purpose is. We don't know exactly how we're going to accomplish it. In fact, there's going to be a lot of different ways to accomplish it, and there's going to be, and it's going to accumulate over time.
Yeah.
And so I'll leave it with that. And Zofna?
Yeah, I thank you. Sofnat. Yeah, so I wanted to build on what Bennett said, which is actually at the center of my work, to recognize that we all live in an individualist Western society. So we are so much swimming in this water that gets, in my opinion, dirty, that we don't see where we're swimming. So even if we analyze how the question is framed from an individualist point of view and not from a holistic wholeness point of view, as to, it's like there's a separation between the leader and other people. And I also said in the chat that it's a time that it's better to talk about leadership and not about leaders, because no leader can do it all. We all do it together. And I think the wise thing is to create those spaces for us to be able to create new things together. So it's really a different paradigm, and we are so much caught in the bounded self that we keep dividing ourselves from others, and the other becomes peripheral, constructors and those being constructed, and add to it the hegemony of the white male, sorry for all of you here. So it's really not the word that I would like to see now. So that's my point. Thank you.
I think it's a very important point, because it's, in my experience, it's those stories that many leaders have, that they should be the ones to find the way forward, and they should be the ones to have the answer. Sorry, she's just disappeared from the screen. You know, these are the things that do get in the way of working in this different way. Absolutely. The idea that the leader is somehow, that leadership is embodied in the leader rather than embodied in a set of relationships or in a system. And I love the idea of the leadership full organization. I can't find the quote at the moment, and that during change, what we need is a leadership full organization, i.e. lots of people able to offer leadership in different areas and frames, which fits very well with the approach that Jervis is talking about, where having established the purpose and working together, and you come up with ideas to take forward to see how they work. Let's try them out. Are they going to offer us a path forward? And not one leader can lead all these projects. We need lots of people leading projects, little projects here and there. Let's see what works. Let's try doing different things. Let's find what success emerges from different approaches. And going back to the vision thing, very much building on what Mark was saying, he talked about something about the pathways, and the expression I came across, which I really like, is building the bridge as we walk on it. So we kind of know where we want to get to. We want to be working better together. We want to be more successful in the market. Jervis, by the way, has a whole load of great both and phrases. If you can think of any at the moment, I can't remember them, but they bring together contradictory ideas into one frame that raises the whole conversation up to a different level. So we know where we want to get. We don't know how to get there yet, and we need to find out by trying. You know, the way will emerge as we move forward. So yeah, it was a great contribution, I thought.
Thanks, Sarah. Dave, I want to kind of draw you in, as you've been sitting very patiently, and thank you also for the great summaries you've been providing in chat.
No problem. That's a way of it landing for me. I use my kind of twist on leadership I call generative leadership, and I'm interested in the distinction or not between generative leadership and emergence, because emergence might be happenstance, it might be unplanned, it might be unforeseen, it might not be intentional. So there's a kind of randomness to what I feel emergence is. And I think that for me, generative, which has some of those qualities, has a kind of phase shift element to it, something that literally changes your worldview or changes you permanently, you might say. Something that's generative actually alters or deepens your relationship to life in some way. So there's a kind of profundity or change of magnitude in experience that I think is interesting. And I was because you guys are obviously professionals in following sort of generative leadership and emergence. So I was interested in your reflections on the interface between those two elements.
Sure. In my world, they go together. You know, in my lexicon, generative leadership is the kind of leadership that is required in emergent change processes. And more, I think what's happening is organizations have, for the last 40 years, been making this move away from sort of structured hierarchy through to self-management, and now increasingly to self-organizing. And I think that generative leadership is required to manage self-organizing systems effectively. And that's one of the reasons why Agile has had such a hard time moving from a small group thing into an organizational thing, because they're trying to manage Agile the same way they would manage self-managing, and it doesn't work. Yeah.
For me, there's something about generative that's to do with opening up new possibilities. And emergence can go in all sorts of ways, as you quite correctly say, Dave. But sometimes emergence can lead to very narrow paths, you know, the same people walking up and down the same path all the time. There's something for me about generative that is very positively about opening new possibilities. And of course, not all of these will flower or even be useful. But for me, that's generative has that connotation.
Lovely. I'm just conscious of time marching on, and I know we could stay in these conversations for a lot longer. But what I want to do, firstly, I just think there's some amazing comments, observations, ideas, suggestions that's going on in chat, which is brilliant. And I for one will definitely be downloading chat before the end of the session and having a good read through it, because I think there's some fabulous stuff in there. So keep that coming in. What I want to do now is give you the opportunity to go into smaller groups and to do some digesting, to do some meaning making, and to do some sharing with each other about what you've heard so far, and you might be responding to the question, what got your attention during this last half an hour, or what does this mean for me in my work context, or in my role and the work that I'm doing at the moment. So Jervis, what have we got set up for breakout rooms?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up a bunch of rooms and allow you to assign yourself. And when you see them open up, you'll see that room 1 is assigned for those of you interested in trans-organizational development. And then rooms 2 through 11 are for those of you who consider yourself an external consultant. And rooms 12 through 18 are for internal consultants, and 19 and 20 are for people who don't consider themselves consultants at all. And you can just assign yourself to any room. And if there's somebody you want to go spend time with, you can go spend time with them. You can reassign yourself as the time goes on. So it's kind of a bit of an open space going on here.
Brilliant. And we've got 20 minutes for this conversation. Yeah. So the rooms will close after 20 minutes. Is that right, Jervis? Is that how
that's right? So you should be able to see those now. And if you can't, it probably means you haven't got a Zoom client on your device. And I'll just send you to one once we see who goes where. So
brilliant, great. So go and move yourselves around and go and enjoy some conversations. And should we pause the recording at this point, Jervis?
Thank you.
Thank you. So, thanks, Jervis. So welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. I hope that's been an insightful and thought-provoking 20 minutes with different people who you may know or you may not know. What I'd like to give you the opportunity to do is to just spend a couple of moments individually, just digesting those last 20 minutes, and to ask you to think about what's emerged for you during these conversations. So what is now emerging for you during these conversations? And it may be something completely new from what you joined us with an hour ago. And I'd like you to just pop those thoughts into chat. And we'll just spend a couple of moments and we can just see the richness then and what is emerging for people now after these breakout groups and listening to us as in our panel conversation.
I do wish Zoom would invent a thumbs up button for the chat or something, because there's quite a lot of things I'd like to kind of upvote here, but they haven't yet. So
now you can just do a general thumbs up to everybody, can't you?
We're very open to feedback, so if you write it, you never know, it might happen.
Ah, okay, good to know. Good to know. Oh, there's some fabulous stuff coming up in here as I'm just reading through it. So I'm going to invite my author colleagues to just pick up on anything that you're noticing in the chat that you may want to speak to, and also open up an invitation for anybody else who wants to speak and either share what's happened and emerged for them, or what is being sparked by reading some of these comments. So first of all, let me just open up the conversation to any of my author colleagues, something that's emerging for you now as a result of reading some of the comments in chat.
So I'm picking up, there's a comment from Jonathan Sibley, NYC, who says the idea of a continuum between fully emergent and planned, and is it even just one dimension? Yes, absolutely. That's a really good point. Even emergent people don't work totally emergently. If they do, they look as if they're stumbling around without a clue. So that's not it. But so there is, even generative OD practitioners, we have things we do, and we have kind of conversations we start, and we have ways to engage people, and then you have to see what happens, and then you tune it, and then you respond, and so on. So yes, so sometimes I think there's a straw man version of emergent change out there that says, oh, it's just people fumbling around, which of course it isn't. But you can see how that idea might be put around by some folk, naming no names, who want to sell plan change processes. So
sorry, Mark. There's a phrase come up in the chat that's a new one to me, and Isabel, I'm trying to find you on my screen at the moment. Cloud and clock problems. Can you just? It's a phrase I've never heard, and I'm very curious about.
It was someone in my group. It was someone in my group who said it. Maybe they might jump in and explain.
Lovely, please. Whose phrase was that?
That was from me. It's actually not from me, even though as well, but it was my dead countryman Karl Popper, and he came up with this metaphor distinguishing between cloud and clock problems. Yeah, and he said, and cloud problems are very high complexity versus clock problems, technical things. So. Because somebody raised the question, when is planned change appropriate and when is emergent change appropriate? And the very simple question, of course, there's a continuum, but the very simple question would be for cloud problems, emergent change; for clock problems, more planned change. But even simple problems seem to be high complexity these days. So yeah, I think there needs to be an element of emergence, even in the most planned through, structured plan change approach.
Lovely.
Which everyone supports, yeah. But
yeah, thank you, Suzanne. That's great. And I can see Annette's put something in there into chat as well. So thank you. That was a new phrase for me.
Yeah. What I didn't mention before, and I find myself using with almost all clients when I first start with them, is the sort of adaptive challenges versus technical problems, the Ron Heifetz thing, and kind of do a little teach on the difference between them. And I love Heifetz's phrase, the greatest single failure of leadership is to treat an adaptive challenge like a technical problem. And then I ask them, are you doing that? Yeah, and they'll go, yeah, we are. I say, how's that working out for you? And they go, it's not working out. And then I show them Kuhnevin, and I go and I explain the research behind why in complexity versus complicated, the best solution is to try stuff out and learn as you go, as a change strategy. Does that make sense to you? Yeah, it kind of makes sense to us. And then often I'll do a thing where I use Ralph Stacey's distinctions between sort of the dominant mindset and the complex responsive mindset, and kind of go through those. And can you see this as a way to think about organizing? Yeah, we can. I say, well, you know, if you want to deal with adaptive challenges and using an emergent process, you're going to have to start thinking this way. So that's kind of my 3 steps into helping leaders step into this idea. And I think cloud and clock is just another metaphor for that, right?
Yeah, lovely. Lovely.
I like
I
the
can-
sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah. I'll go after you.
I like the comment ownership by Chris Quinn of I may have inadvertently expressed enormous impatience. The organization people haven't got a grip on this yet, to summarize. And I think that is interesting. And you just heard the path that Jervis leads people along from what they think is going to be appropriate to what might actually address their adaptive challenge. And I think there is an interesting question of why is it so persistent? What is so attractive about plan change to all of us and to leaders dealing with complex situations particularly? And I know part of the answer is because in so many areas it works. In ordinary everyday life, how am I going to get from London to Edinburgh in time to do this, that, or the other? You know, given train strikes, given hurricane winds or whatever everything else, it's still actually a kind of logical problem. I just have to work it out. When that becomes emergent, you're in real trouble because there's no facilities. There's a long taxi queue and that's it, you know. So it has to be, we do use planned all the time, but there's something about the attractiveness and the difficulty of giving it up. And it is stepping into the unknown for people. And I think we do have to, I recognize where you're coming from, Chris, but I think we do have to recognize it's often stepping into the unknown, and they are giving up things that have supported their position in that organization or their sense of themselves as a leader, probably quite successfully in other, you know, in the past, or at least it's looked successful.
I just want to amplify that, and I want to say, Sarah, I think your book on co-creating planning teams for Dialogic OD is without a doubt the best book on the realities of bringing an emergent approach to people who have no idea what it is. It just lays out all the traps that are there and how to get out of them, and it's incredibly realistic and practical.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
If you're interested in that, highly get on Amazon, buy Sarah's book.
That was another book in the series with a really catchy title, which is Co-Creating. I can't even remember it.
Yeah,
Co-Creating a Planning Team for Dialogic OD. I thought harder about that, Jervis.
So Ben, what was it that you wanted to add into the conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Gwen. So for all of you who are off in your breakout groups, the authors here were chatting, and we got a cup, refreshed our coffee, and we were musing on the question of like those people, those leaders. Why is it that they grab onto discernible linear outcomes and planned change? And then I was thinking, and Bob asked me what I was thinking. So this is actually my chance to respond to Bob, but it ties to quite a bit of our conversation here. And I think there's a second duality that is a part of the paradigm that we swim in, which is a we, they, and us, them duality. Like here we are, consultants, coaches, incredibly self-actualized, and there's those people. Look at them. So aren't they cute? Pat them on the head. They're grabbing onto predictable outcomes. And I'm not saying that we do that. I'm not trying to. I'm overstating a point with hyperbole, and I know that. I think there's a part of us that we are them. We actually need describable, discernible plan change outcomes in our lives. And if we put our businesses, each one of us, on a line, or our paycheck, and whether or not we could pay the mortgage, because someone was going to come in and ask us to suddenly be comfortable with something emergent that we didn't understand, we'd have a whole bunch of questions. And that the empathy that can help us interact with them is the same empathy we need for ourselves. Like their careers are on the line. This stuff is scary. Things like, your employee engagement survey that shows that most people don't trust you, and I got to get those scores up, or I'm going to be ranked in this part of the, performance potential chart and my, it's like very real things are at stake for them. And just as they would be in our lives, like somebody close to me, their furnace went out in the very cold night here in the Pacific Northwest. And they were terrified, like how to spend the night alone without a furnace. What are they going to do? And what they needed was a plan. They needed a plan change for a new furnace. And it was a totally emergent situation and they had to scramble. That's our lives and that's our clients' lives. And I think for me, speaking to myself, I always need to start with empathy for them, for our clients, for what they're going, and for me. And create that space for them to have all sorts of feelings they probably can't even verbalize up front.
Yeah. And so have I done my own work before I'm then offering my support to other people? So where am I being hooked by what's going on, maybe for some of my clients? I think it's just such an important thing about turning the lens on ourselves, as well as sharing what we can share and what we have to offer with others as well.
Yeah. And in the chat, there's been a lot of talk about anxiety and managing anxiety and the client's anxiety and all that kind of stuff. And one of the people on the call today, Tom Everell, is the most generative leader I've ever studied. And Tom, can you come in here and talk a bit about how you managed your and the group's anxieties during that transformation you were doing?
I think the short answer is I didn't. That I was afraid, but we went forward anyway. I mean, I parked, as you know, Jervis, I parked as much of it as I could in my journal. But there was plenty.
That's highly significant. Like the amount of journaling you did, the amount of, Reiki massage, and just like this weekly practice of just dumping the anxiety that you are holding for your organization is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and I think the answer is I was afraid, but we did the work anyway. And you just keep going.
That's an old expression, isn't it? I like it. Feel the fear and do it anyway. That's definitely how things grow.
It's just part of the experience. I mean, it's like light generates heat and heat generates light. It's just part of. I was also struck by who was it, Marvin Weisbord and can't remember her name.
Sandra
talked
Jack.
about talk about reframing anxiety as the energy of what's about to happen. That was really useful for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you taught me that one. Feeling anxiety and experience it as excitement.
Right.
And it works.
Well, sort of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Going to capture that one in chat.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant. So as we're continuing our meaning making and digesting and the comments that are coming into chat, anything else, any other insights that are coming up for people that they want to share? Something new that's emerging for you as a result of our time together?
Can I comment on my personal experience as a leader who did change from plan change to more emergent approach? A big driver for me was learning about constructionism and versus positivism, and that was kind of an underlying thing that I think helped me change in many ways. So it was almost started almost at the sort of philosophical level before I got to the operational or strategic levels of it.
It is a key sort of worldview shift. I think that's absolutely right. And I think effective leaders need to be able to operate in both, however you describe them: modernism, postmodernism, constructionist, positivist. There's different ways of talking about this difference. But it needs to be both and. I can both work in this way and that way. I can recognize when this is appropriate and when that is appropriate. I can see that it's not this, that this can be happening in that and that can be happening in this. And in fact, a paper we came across recently that Jervis shared very much recognized that working in a diagnostic and a dialogic way together often had better results than doing either on their own, because they can be complementary as well as different. And having those two languages and those two abilities, I think, is absolutely key. And I agree. When I was teaching, teaching change, that was a big part of the program. Was if we're thinking like this, it's like this. But when we're over here in this, this worldview, the more constructionist, social constructionist worldview, then we think about everything differently. We understand communication differently. We understand language differently. We understand words differently. All of which are so key to those dialogic conversations we have in emergence, where we're trying to co-create a new meaning and a new way forward and a new understanding of our situations. I think that's a really, really valuable comment in this conversation. Thank you.
Well, we got 5 minutes left in the time we've allotted for this. Some of you have been asking for a copy of the chat. Mark's been downloading that and putting it into the chat itself. So if you look for Mark McCurgo, you'll find the pretty close to the end here. All the chat's been saved and it's available for you. I'm also putting into the chat a paper I wrote a couple of years ago on generative leadership from generative change. If any of you are interested, you can download it from there. This is the second OD Salon we've run, and I'd be very interested in getting a little information from you on how interesting this is to you and how much more you'd like of it. So I'm going to launch a poll here and ask you to take a minute to just answer these questions. There's 3 of them, I think. No, there's 4. If you would. Those of you thinking of a different label, if you would put that in the chat, that would be awesome. That's in response to question 4.
Good questions in there, Jervis, because these we're busy experimenting, really, aren't we, with these kind of different formats and how we bring people together and continue to kind of share and explore what we do. Yeah, nice.
So you can get a look at the results here. I'm surprised how many people would like to be in a reading club. And we'll do something to help facilitate that. So thank you for that. We're coming to an end. Just an opportunity to announce that Bushe-Marshak Institute's just published its 8th book. Very proud. It just came out today. I'm going to share the cover title with you. Why is that in the way there? Get out of the way. Do you see a little black thing?
Can't see your screen yet.
Huh.
It says you've started screen sharing.
Yeah, but we can't
see anything.
Yeah, I'm crashing.
Oh.
Oh no, stop it.
Oh, dropped off.
Oh, he's gone. I think what he was wanting to do was to share the cover of the new book.
Yes.
I think I have got a copy of, if you just bear with me 1 second.
And I'll just mention that I just added a paper on anxiety, leadership, and change that from a couple of years ago that people might find related to the topics we've been talking about, certainly related to what I've been talking about. Jerv, where are you searching for your?
I was putting up a cover of the book called Change Champions, a dialogic approach to creating an inclusive culture by Fred Miller, Judith Katz, and Monica Biggs, and it just landed on Amazon. And it's a different book from those we published in the past, because it's offering a different approach to dialogic change than the generative change model or the high engagement model. It's a different thing where you create a cadre of internals who are going to promote a different cultural narrative.
There we go.
Thank you. Okay, so I think it's a great book. And I also think while the focus of this is on creating inclusive cultures, you can utilize this strategy for any sort of, if you're trying to make a major change in a culture. It could be around safety, could be around cost consciousness, that where you're really dealing with a resistant culture. I think this is really a viable change strategy, and it's a really great book and laying out kind of the steps you need to go through in making that be effective. So
brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we're just coming up to 1:30. Somebody was asking in the chat whereabouts is the final copy of the Save Chat. The last one that Mark uploaded was at 20 past the hour, because it's different. We're all in different time zones. So on my chat, it shows at 17:20, a little bit further up.
I just put one in. I just put one in now.
Brilliant.
So, yeah.
Brilliant. So that should be the last one.
Save chat.text.
Yeah. So thank you all for showing up.
Yeah,
and it's been a fabulous conversation. Either enjoy your evening or enjoy the rest of your day, depending on where you are in the day.
Nope, the book is in print.
Thanks.
Said it's only
Thank you very much to all. I really appreciate part of this session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Take care.
Thanks, Gwen.
You too.
Pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
Thank you.